Welcome back, everyone. Today we're focusing on a really prominent natural feature in the Midwest Grandad Bluff, right there in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Yeah. And we've got a couple of interesting sources to draw from. There's a regional plan document that looks at the wider blufflands
Right.
and also a historical account. So we can kind of piece together the story.
Exactly. Our goal is to explore, its history, how people use it now, and also the conservation side of things around this landmark.
It's definitely more than just a pretty view. It's really woven into the community's identity in La Crosse.
Okay, let's dig into that history first. Because this isn't some new discovery, right? Grandad Bluff has been important for a long, long time.
Oh, absolutely. The historical records make that really clear. People were going up there for photos, for picnics, way back in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
There's this great little story from 1904. Apparently, people would hike up specifically to get family portraits taken at the top.
Wow. Dressed up and everything, I read.
Yeah.
In their Sunday best.
Yeah, exactly. It really shows you it was considered a special destination, even then.
Definitely a trip worth dressing up for.
For sure. And it was only about leisure either. The sources connect it directly to early industry in the area.
How so?
Well, limestone quarrying, they were actually taking limestone right out of these bluffs for building materials in La Crosse.
So the town was literally being built from the bluffs, in a way.
That's right. And you also see the bluffs as a backdrop for agriculture. There's a picture from around 1915 showing workers planting for the Salter Seed Company at the Ebner Homestead, I think it was. And the bluffs are just looming right there behind them, part of the working landscape.
That's quite a picture. And I saw a mention, too, if you were hiking or maybe working in those quarries back then, say around 1915.
Yeah.
There's a spot called the Bluffside Tavern near Main Street.
That's right. Serving hikers, quarry workers. It gives you a real sense of how the bluff was just part of everyday life for different kinds of people back then.
Okay, so fast forward to today. Grandad Bluff is still obviously a huge draw. And it's part of the larger Hickson Forest area now, right?
Exactly. And its popularity is, well, it's really something. They did a community survey back in 2015 about recreation. And Grandad Bluff Park itself came in second place. 18% of people named it as their most popular spot.
Second only to Hickson Forest as a whole, which includes the bluff, right?
Yeah.
That got 57%.
Yeah, which is interesting. It shows that even within that bigger forest area, Grandad Bluff itself has this really strong, distinct identity for people.
And why did people say they liked it so much?
Well, the main reasons were pretty clear. Opportunities for hiking, it's easy to get to, and of course, the amazing views.
Can't beat those views.
Yeah.
The sheer number of people using these areas, it's high, isn't it?
It's huge. The survey found something like 90% of the respondents had visited either Hickson Forest or Grandad Bluff Park in the last year.
Wow, 90%. That really tells you how important these places are for people living there.
Absolutely. It's clearly central to their quality of life.
So, with all of those visitors, what kind of things can you actually do in Hickson Forest? What's allowed?
Okay, so the plan lays it out. Things like hiking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. Those are all fine. And some mountain biking on designated trails.
Activities that are generally pretty low impact.
Right. And then there's a list of things you can't do, which also tells you a lot about the management priorities.
Like what?
Things like no motorized recreational vehicles, ATVs, snowmobiles, that kind of stuff. No overnight camping, no paintball, no rock climbing.
Okay.
And basically anything else that could, increase safety risks or damage the habitat, cause erosion, or just reduce the peacefulness of the place.
So the focus is definitely on preserving the natural character and a certain kind of quiet recreation.
That seems to be the goal, yeah.
Which makes sense when you think about the whole area, not just Grandad Bluff. The regional plan talks a lot about the blufflands.
Yes, that term comes up again and again. And it's interesting, when they asked residents in the survey what the blufflands meant to them.
What'd they say?
Pretty consistent things, actually. The hills around La Crosse, or the hills along the Mississippi. Some just said beautiful or natural topography.
And identified it as part of the driftless region, which is geographically accurate.
Right. So based on that, the plan actually recommends using the blufflands as like a common name, maybe even a brand.
Why?
Because it's unique to the area and people there already seem to understand and use the term. It could help coordinate efforts,
Makes sense. So who actually owns all this bluffland? Is it mostly public?
Overwhelmingly public, based on the sources. Something like 90% of the preserved land in their study area is owned by public entities.
Wow.
And the city of La Crosse is the biggest single owner. They manage around 7,770 acres spread across 86 different parcels.
And one of the tools used to protect these lands, even private ones sometimes, is conservation easements. Right. Can you explain those a bit?
Sure. So basically, a conservation easement is a legal agreement. A landowner agrees voluntarily to restrict certain uses on their property, usually development to protect its natural value.
And it stays with the land.
Often, yeah. They're typically perpetual, meaning the restrictions apply even if the land gets sold down the line.
Okay, so if land has an easement on it, does that mean you or I can just go walk on it? Public access?
Not automatically, no. The easement itself doesn't guarantee public access unless that's specifically written into the agreement. But, and this is important,
Okay.
if public money was used, like from Wisconsin's Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Program, which is a big funding source there, if that program's funds help buy the land or the easement,
Then access is required?
then public access is usually required as a condition of that funding. So the funding source often dictates the access rules. It's a key detail.
Gotcha. So beyond just acquiring land and setting rules, what are the day-to-day challenges in managing these blufflands?
Well, one big one that comes up is invasive species, non-native plants that can really take over.
Like what kind of species are we talking about?
The sources mention things like common buckthorn, garlic mustard, autumn olive, Tatarian honeysuckle, stuff that outcompetes the native plants that belong there.
Right, that can really change the whole ecosystem. So how do they fight that?
It's tough. It usually takes a combination of methods. The plan talks about using prescribed fire, sometimes targeted chemical treatments,
Okay.
biological controls if possible, managing the forest canopy, and just physically removing the plant's mechanical removal. It's an ongoing effort.
Sounds like a lot of work, especially spread across all those different parcels and owners.
It absolutely is. Which leads right into another idea from the plan, forming a bluffland coalition.
A coalition, what would that do?
The idea is to create a forum, basically, a place for all the different partners, public agencies, private groups, landowners to coordinate their actions, share resources, tackle issues like invasives together, maybe standardize signage, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes sense for managing such a connected landscape.
Yeah.
How would something like that be funded?
They proposed a couple of ways, maybe direct contributions from the member towns or counties, perhaps based on population size, and also actively seeking grants and donations. The goal is to make it sustainable so they can actually implement coordinated plans over the long term.
Right. All this effort really points to how valuable people find these blufflands. What are the main benefits that the sources highlight?
Well, obviously they're huge for recreation, but beyond that, the sources point to real health and economic benefits too.
The health part seems straightforward, getting outside, exercising.
Totally. Physical activity is key. But the research cited actually shows that exercising in a natural setting, like the blufflands, gives you an extra boost, better mood, higher self-esteem. It's apparently more mentally restorative than, say, working out indoors.
Interesting. That nature connection matters. What about the economic side? How does a place like Grandad Bluff help the local economy?
A big argument made in the plan is about attracting workforce talent.
How so?
The idea is that having great outdoor recreation amenities makes the La Crosse region more appealing to live in, especially for, younger educated professionals and tech companies. Quality of life features like access to nature are becoming really important when people and businesses decide where to locate.
Are there examples of that working elsewhere?
Yeah, the sources bring up Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Duluth, Minnesota. Both cities invested heavily in their outdoor spaces, trails, parks, waterfronts.
And saw results.
Significant results, yeah. Chattanooga attributes over $1 billion in annual tourism impact, partly to its outdoor focus. Duluth also saw huge growth in tourism after decades of investing in its parks and trails. It suggests that investing in nature can pay off economically.
And that economic value seems connected to how much the local community supports protecting these areas, like we saw in that survey.
Exactly. There was really strong support shown for protection measures. For example, people were strongly in favor of adopting a specific bluff protection ordinance.
To limit development, right?
No.
Especially near the tops of the bluffs.
Precisely. And they got specific. A clear majority, almost 60%, supported changing the rules to limit development on slopes steeper than 20%.
Which was stricter than the existing county standard at the time.
Yeah, the standard then allowed disturbing slopes up to 30%. So it suggests the community was really pushing for stronger environmental protection for those sensitive areas.
Did they even ask about paying for it? Like through taxes?
They did. They asked how much people would be willing to pay annually in increased property taxes, specifically for bluffland protection and improvements.
Yeah.
There was a range of responses, but it showed a definite willingness from a good portion of the community to actually put money towards maintaining and improving these natural assets. It wasn't just talk, there was some willingness to pay.
Okay, let's touch on a couple of specific, maybe more ground-level challenges that came up in managing these areas.
Sure. One practical thing mentioned, I think from interviews they did for the plan, was about timing for trail use.
Time.
Yeah, like emphasizing how important it is not to use trails during the spring thaw when they're really muddy and easily damaged.
Ah, right. That can wreck a trail quickly.
Exactly. And another point was educating users about different trail types, especially in winter, making sure, say, runners or people on regular bikes aren't messing up the groomed cross-country ski trails. Basic trail etiquette, but important for managing shared spaces.
Makes sense. And you mentioned funding sources impacting use earlier. That Knowles-Nelson program requiring access, was there more on that?
Yeah, there was a bit more context. While Knowles-Nelson generally requires public access, sometimes the managing agency, like the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, DNR, might acquire land primarily for habitat reasons.
Okay.
In those cases, the DNR might put restrictions on certain types of recreation, even if Knowles-Nelson funds were involved, to prioritize the habitat goals. Things like mountain biking might be restricted in some sensitive areas.
Was there a specific example of that causing friction?
Yes, the Matthew property was mentioned. It's apparently a really important connector parcel, and it includes an old mine site.
Right.
When it was acquired, there were initial DNR restrictions that limited some planned mountain biking access, particularly on that former mine area. It apparently took some effort to negotiate and try to regain some of that access for bikers.
So it highlights that tension, doesn't it, between conservation goals, funding rules, and different recreational demands.
Definitely. It shows you need to think carefully about desired uses before land is acquired and how the funding source and managing agency's priorities might affect those uses down the road.
So when you step back and look at Grandad Bluff and the whole Blufflands area, it's quite a story, isn't it? You got this deep history, immense current popularity for recreation, and these really complex ongoing efforts around conservation, management, funding, plus the clear economic and community value tied into it all.
It really is a dynamic picture. These aren't just static landscapes. They're constantly being shaped by how people have used them in the past, how they use them now, and how they're actively managed for the future. It's a real balancing act.
Balancing access and all the different things people want to do.
With the need to protect the ecology for the long haul and figuring out how to pay for it all sustainably. It's not simple.
And maybe that leaves you, the listener, with something to think about. When you have a place with such deep historical roots that's so popular today and facing these pressures, how does a community like La Crosse keep finding that balance? How do you manage ever-increasing public use and diverse recreational desires alongside that crucial need for ecological protection and sustainable funding? It's a key question for many places, but maybe especially sharp in a landscape defined quite literally by its bluffs.